Understood. Here's section 1 written as a direct, faceless narrative script, with no headings or scene markers, keeping it to the point and hitting the approximately 760-word target. From the outside, everything about my marriage looked settled. People envied me for having a husband who worked hard, who provided stability, who never failed in responsibility. What no one saw was the silence that grew between us. Imran had become a man of routines. Wake up, rush to the office, come home late, eat in silence, scroll through his phone until sleep pulled him away. Conversations, once alive with dreams and small joys, had withered into short reminders about bills, groceries, or appointments. I waited for moments of closeness that never arrived. Nights became the hardest, lying in bed with him only inches away, yet feeling like I was on the other side of the world. The warmth that used to live between us had been replaced by a void. I tried. I cooked his favorite meals, asked about his day, left notes in his briefcase. But effort without reciprocation begins to feel like begging, and soon I stopped. Loneliness became my quiet companion. I grew skilled at pretending smiling at family gatherings, posting pictures that painted us as the perfect couple, while inside I craved something as simple as being seen, being heard. My reflection in the mirror sometimes startled me. The woman staring back looked older, not in years but in spirit, worn down by neglect. It was at a mutual friend's gathering that I saw Samir again. Years had passed since college, yet he carried the same warmth, the same easy presence. He noticed me immediately, and his smile was genuine, not the polite mask I had grown used to. We talked casually at first, about life, about how quickly time had flown. But there was something different in the way he listened. His eyes held steady. His responses were thoughtful. He remembered details from years ago, little things about me that even my husband had long forgotten. It felt like being reminded of a version of myself I thought no longer existed. As the evening wore on, I found myself laughing, really laughing, something I hadn't done in months. It startled me, the sound of my own joy. Samir didn't ask prying questions, but his concern was unspoken, hidden in the gentleness of his words. When he said, "You still have that spark, Awisha," my heart tightened. It wasn't a flirtation. It was recognition, and it filled the hollow space inside me like nothing had in years. After that night, he sent a short message, just to say it was good seeing me again. I hesitated before replying, knowing what it meant to open that door, but loneliness is a persuasive force. Soon our messages became more frequent, simple exchanges that carried more weight than they should have. He asked how I was doing, genuinely, wanting to know, not just out of courtesy. I found myself waiting for his words, the way they reminded me that I wasn't invisible. Meanwhile, at home, nothing changed. Imran remained absorbed in his world of deadlines and clients. If he noticed my silence, he didn't ask. He seemed relieved that I no longer pressed him for conversations, as if my withdrawal made life easier for him. I wondered if he even realized how far apart we had drifted. Sometimes I imagined shouting just to provoke a reaction, but even anger required a connection that no longer existed between us. There was a night I remember vividly. I had cooked dinner, lit candles out of habit rather than expectation. He arrived late, muttered a thanks without meeting my eyes, and ate quickly before retreating to his study. I sat alone at the table, staring at the flickering candle until the wax melted into nothing. My phone buzzed, and it was Samir. He wrote, "I hope you're taking care of yourself. You deserve to be heard." The words burned in my chest because they named exactly what was missing from my life. I deserved to be heard, yet I lived in silence. The contrast between them grew sharper with each passing day. Samir's attention reminded me of the woman I once was, lively, expressive, deserving of affection. Imran's indifference reminded me of what I had become, muted, diminished, a shadow in my own marriage. I didn't seek out more from Samir, but I didn't push it away either. The line between friendship and something more blurred each time he reached out, and deep inside, I knew I was walking toward dangerous ground. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Imran asleep beside me, I replayed every word Samir had said. My phone rested on the nightstand, glowing faintly with the memory of his message. I told myself it was harmless, that I was simply reconnecting with an old friend, but my heart knew differently. Loneliness had opened a crack, and through it, light had entered. What I didn't realize was how quickly that light would grow, and how impossible it would become to control. Word count, approximately 762, asterisk. Do you want me to move straight into writing section 2, 760 words, in the same style now? Understood. Here's section 2, written as a continuous faceless script with no headings or scene markers, direct and to the point. 760 words. The messages turned into late-night conversations. At first, they were short and casual, updates about work, memories from college, jokes that made me laugh softly under the covers while Imran slept beside me. But slowly, the conversations deepened. Samir asked about my dreams, about what made me happy, about how life had treated me in the years since we had last spoken. I answered more than I intended, revealing pieces of myself I hadn't shared with anyone in years. It felt strange, opening up so easily, but with him I didn't feel judged, only understood. The more I spoke with him, the more I realized how much I had missed being seen. Samir noticed the smallest things, the way I phrased a sentence, the pauses in my voice, even when I seemed tired. He cared in ways that felt foreign to me now. Each message, each call, was like water to a parched soul, and I couldn't bring myself to stop. The guilt pressed against me, but the pull of connection was stronger. Imran remained unchanged. Work trips kept him away for days, and even when he was home, his mind was elsewhere. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed that I was slipping further away. He never asked why I stayed up late, why I smiled faintly at my phone, why I seemed lighter at times. His indifference gave me the space to continue what I knew I shouldn't. It was as though he had unknowingly opened the door wider for me to step through. Samir began sharing his own vulnerabilities. He spoke of his struggles, the loneliness he sometimes felt, the relationships that never seemed to last. There was an honesty in his words that drew me closer. I began to anticipate his voice, the way it soothed me, the way it filled the emptiness Imran had left behind. With every conversation, I felt the boundary between us fading. What started as innocent had begun to carry an undercurrent of something more dangerous, something we both felt but didn't name. One evening, while Imran was away on yet another trip, Samir offered to bring over a book we had spoken about. I hesitated, but loneliness convinced me to say yes. When he arrived, it felt natural, like he belonged in my space. We sat and talked for hours, our words flowing without effort. I confessed how hollow my marriage felt, how unseen I had become, how much it hurt to live like a ghost in my own home. He listened without interruption, his gaze steady, his silence gentle but full of understanding. For the first time in years, I let the tears fall, and he didn't look away. That night blurred the line we had been tiptoeing around. He reached for my hand and I didn't pull away. The warmth of his touch was both terrifying and comforting, a reminder of everything I had been starved of. I told myself it was only comfort, but deep down I knew the truth. When he whispered that he had always admired me, that he never wanted to interfere, but couldn't ignore what he felt anymore, my defenses crumbled. The kiss came softly, almost hesitant, but it ignited something I thought had died inside me. One moment of weakness turned into a cascade I couldn't stop. When it was over, silence pressed heavy between us. I felt a rush of guilt, but alongside, it was a strange sense of being alive again. Samir held me, and for a fleeting moment I felt safe, cared for, wanted. It was everything I had longed for, and yet it terrified me. I knew what this meant, what line we had crossed, what betrayal had been committed. My heart pounded with the weight of it, but I couldn't deny the truth. Something had awakened inside me. Something I wasn't ready to bury again. He left quietly, and I sat in the stillness of my home, trembling. Imrine's absence had created this space, but it was my choice that had filled it. I told myself it was only one night, one slip, that I would never let it happen again. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. The taste of closeness, the feeling of being wanted, was too powerful to erase. That night I lay in bed staring at the empty side where Imran should have been, my mind replaying every moment with Samir. The house felt different now, heavy with secrets. I kept telling myself I was still the same person, still the same wife, but deep inside, I knew I wasn't. The line had been crossed, and no amount of pretending could undo it. Loneliness had led me here, but desire would not let me turn back. Word count, approximately 764, asterisk. Would you like me to move directly into section 3, 760 words? Now, keeping the same sharp quality and no repetition? Perfect. Here's section 3, written as a direct faceless script, keeping it sharp, non-repetitive, and to the point with approximately 760 words. The days after that night carried a weight I couldn't shake. Everything felt different, though nothing in my home had changed. I still cooked dinner, folded clothes, smiled when neighbors greeted me, but beneath it all lived a secret that pulsed with every heartbeat. I thought guilt would crush me, yet what unsettled me most was the memory of feeling alive. Samir had given me something I didn't realize I had been starving for, and the thought of letting it go filled me with fear. Imran remained as detached as ever. He didn't question why I seemed distracted, didn't notice the way I avoided his touch, didn't even sense the walls I built higher around us. His silence became both my shield and my punishment. I wanted him to see me, to ask, to sense that something was wrong. Instead, he carried on as though our marriage required nothing more than coexisting under the same roof. His indifference gave me freedom, but also deepened the ache inside me. My phone became both my comfort and my curse. Every vibration made my heart race. Every message from Samir pulled me further into a space I knew I shouldn't inhabit. He tried to act cautious, reminding me that what happened was complicated, that he didn't want to destroy the life I had built. But even as he said it, his words lingered with longing, and I knew he felt the same pull I did. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, dangerous, a connection that had grown roots too deep to tear out without pain. At night, lying next to Imran, I felt the sharp edge of betrayal. I would close my eyes and see Samir's face, hear his voice, remember his touch. The duality tore at me on one side, the vow I had made, the life I had chosen. On the other, the undeniable truth that I had already broken those vows, already chosen something else in my heart. The struggle wasn't about loyalty anymore. It was about survival of my own spirit. There were moments when I almost confessed. Once, during breakfast, Imran looked at me longer than usual and asked if something was wrong. The words nearly spilled from my mouth, but his tone wasn't filled with concern, only mild curiosity. I swallowed the truth, forced a smile, and said I was fine. The disappointment of that moment sank deep into me. Even faced with an opening, he didn't push further, didn't fight to know what I carried inside. It was then I realized how far gone we really were. Samir and I met less often after that night, but the bond only intensified in absence. Each time we saw one another, even in public settings, our eyes carried the weight of unspoken history. He tried to keep his distance, telling me I deserved clarity, that he didn't want to be the cause of destruction, but his words couldn't erase what had already happened. I knew he cared, and that made it harder. Because it wasn't just temptation, it was connection, real and undeniable. Asterisk at home, tension simmered. Imran started to notice small changes, my late nights on the phone, my distracted silences, the way I avoided lingering too close to him. He didn't confront me directly, but suspicion hung in the air, thick and suffocating. We argued about trivial things, the grocery list, the bills, the laundry. But underneath those small fights was something bigger, something neither of us dared to name. I felt trapped between his silent suspicion and my own restless guilt. Asterisk. The hardest part was knowing that no matter what I chose, something inside me had shifted permanently. Even if I never saw Samir again, even if I buried this secret deep and pretended it never happened, I would never go back to being the woman I was before. The moment I crossed that line, everything I believed about myself, about my marriage, about loyalty was rewritten. I was no longer untouched by betrayal. I had become the very thing I once swore I would never be. Asterisk. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I often replayed that first moment when we were alone, when everything began. It haunted me, not only because of the mistake it represented, but because of how much it revealed about my emptiness. The truth was brutal. One night had shown me how fragile love can be, how quickly trust can shatter, how silence in a marriage can be more destructive than words. Asterisk. I don't know what the future holds, whether my secret will remain hidden, whether Imran will ever learn the truth, or whether I'll find the strength to end what I started. What I do know is that there is no going back. I crossed into a space where love, guilt, desire, and regret all bleed together, and no amount of denial can undo it. People think betrayal happens suddenly, but it begins slowly, in neglect, in silence, in being unseen, until one moment arrives. When the choice is made. That moment was mine, and it changed everything forever. Word count, approximately 761, asterisk. Would you like me to now create the final polished combined script, all 3 sections, into one seamless 2,000-word story, so you have the full version ready in one piece for your faceless video? Got it, since your original structure was 3 sections. But now you want section 4 as a continuation. I'll extend the story naturally, keeping it sharp, emotional, non-repetitive, and faceless. This section will focus on the long-term aftermath, how the secret weighs on Aisha, the widening cracks in her marriage, and the lingering bond with Samir. Word count approximately 760. Time did not erase what had happened. It only buried it beneath layers of silence. Weeks turned into months, but the memory of that night clung to me like a shadow that refused to fade. I carried it into every room, every conversation, every glance with Imran. It was there when I set the table, when I folded his shirts, when I looked at him across the dinner plate and pretended nothing had changed. What unsettled me most was how easily life carried on, as though betrayal could exist quietly behind closed doors without ever breaking through. Asterisk. But I knew it was breaking me. The guilt did not arrive in loud waves, it lived in subtle cracks. When Imran asked about my day, I answered quickly, careful not to reveal the places my thoughts had wandered. When he reached for me out of habit, I stiffened, forcing myself to comply, all while knowing my body carried memories of someone else. I became an expert at disguising, but the act wore me down until even my reflection looked like a stranger. Asterisk. Samir and I no longer met often, but he remained in my life in quiet ways. His messages came less frequently, always cautious, but I clung to them more than I wanted to admit. Even when he didn't speak of us, the weight of our connection lingered between every word. There were times I wished he would disappear completely, make the choice I didn't have the strength to make, but he never did. And neither did I. We remained tethered, not by daily contact, but by the unspoken knowledge that what happened between us could never truly be undone. Asterisk. Imran began to change, though not in the way I had hoped. He grew suspicious without proof. watching me more closely, noticing when I turned my phone face down on the table or when I lingered too long in thought. He didn't accuse me directly, but the distance widened in ways that felt irreversible. Our arguments grew sharper, our silences heavier. Sometimes I wondered if he knew, if some part of him had pieced together the truth, but chose not to speak it aloud. His silence was its own form of punishment, a reminder that even without confession, betrayal has a way of poisoning everything it touches. I often questioned what I truly wanted. Was it love with Samir, or was it simply the version of myself I became in his presence, alive, noticed, desired? I didn't allow myself to answer, because any answer carried consequences I wasn't ready to face. The marriage I had built felt like a house with cracked foundations. It still stood, but I knew it could collapse with a single blow. And yet, I stayed, clinging to stability, even as my heart had already wandered. There were nights I imagined confessing, spilling everything in one breath, just to feel the weight lift. But the image of Imran's face, the betrayal in his eyes, stopped me. I couldn't bring myself to break him the way I had already broken us. So I kept the secret buried, letting it rot inside me, a constant reminder of the line I had crossed. I told myself silence was mercy, but in truth, it was cowardice. The longer it went on, the more I understood that life would never return to what it once was. Even if Samir vanished, even if Imran never uncovered the truth, the damage was permanent. I had betrayed my vows, but my heart had raced with both fear and longing. That single moment had changed everything, and no matter how many days passed, it lived in me like an unhealed scar. People believe betrayal is about passion, about weakness, about losing control, but it is also about emptiness. It begins in the quiet spaces of neglect, where love should be but isn't, and in those spaces, choices are made that alter everything. I don't know if Imran will one day uncover the truth, or if Sam,